when you kick out of that wave, do you instantly have a sense that it was an important wave?
It's funny because I've been asked that a lot, and that day in particular, it felt like every wave that you kicked out of was kind of like the biggest wave of your life. But to answer your question, it was the biggest wave of my life, that one wave in particular. But it's funny, like you remember your friends' rides more than you remember yours, I feel like on days like that. And it's all becoming a little bit of a blur, but I know in the moment I definitely knew it was the biggest wave of my life.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a polite and very humble thing to say. I remember my friends' rides better than my own, but I think there's also the thing where the what we're seeing in the photographs of that wave is kind of the girthiness of how it was doubling up. But for you, the rider, that was behind you.
Yeah.
It's like unless you're in the pocket, you're not really fully appreciating that element of the ride. Whereas you being a friend and watching somebody else, you're seeing all of those details of the wave. And so you can appreciate some of that. And so for you riding the wave, we don't know, like, can you appreciate it in the moment when you're riding it, or does it then set in after the fact? Because with a wave size, it's not, of course, just the height itself, it's that thickness and what that wave kind of the meatiness of it that gets factored into it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you're completely correct. I mean, when we ride our jet skis on those ridge lines and you're towing your friend in and you're looking down, that's super memorable because you get to see the sheer size of that wave. Rather, when you're on that wave, and we did pull into a few barrels that day, and that was, those are memorable for a fact. And because you visually get to see that wave engulf you. But yeah, that wave in particular, I just noticed the speed, right? Like going that fast on a surfboard is pretty remarkable.
So that I guess is the detail is
Yeah.
the girthiness you can feel in
Yeah,
terms of speed, even if you can't fully see it.
exactly.
Um, do you remember what was your impression when you first saw the imagery of the wave?
I actually thought it was photoshopped.
I did too.
Yeah, I texted a few people and I'm like, is this photoshopped? And they're like, no. And I'm like, all right, I like it.
Yeah, I mean, you're a spec.
Yeah. It was it's pretty interesting, right? Have how much it's blown up, and I'm not used to that type of stuff. I'm just kind of here to ride waves and enjoy what I love doing. But the imagery from that day, like everyone's wave looked photoshopped, honestly.
Yeah.
Like it was crazy.
Well, for me, sitting in Southern California, like it was overwhelming because you got all this footage of Jaws, Waimea, Mavericks. It was just too much to fully process. Any one of those rides would have been the ride of the year in any other year, and it was just pouring in. So it's hard to appreciate, but yours stands alone. Despite saying that, yours stands alone at the end of it all.
Right now, I'm trying not to look at anything, just because one, there's just thousands and thousands of people either arguing about the wave height, which I think is really funny, and I'm like, to me, it's hilarious just thinking that it doesn't really matter how big the wave was. I really don't care. And I think they think that I really care. And so surf media, I've been trying not to look at, honestly.
In regard to wave height, do you have a number that you would place on your wave? I know you kind of said you don't care, but is there a number?
I'll let the people decide that. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because and I've talked to a lot of my friends and also just interviews with this, but I think the wave height portion is a little bit of a one sensitive subject, two funny subject to me because for me, I really don't care because it was the biggest wave of my life. And on top of that, I want to pay tribute to those who maybe caught 120 foot, 130-foot waves back in the day and they never got it on camera.
Totally.
So having like the biggest wave ever ridden, it always is like a little bit of a funny thing just, you talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, I remember back in the day we towed into a wave that was 100 feet and there was nobody around. And some of them you believe, some of them you don't. Like somebody like Laird Hamilton, I 100% believe, but they never had any videographers or anything out there. So it's kind of, I'll let the people decide what size the wave was, but all that really matters to me was the biggest wave of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we could add the caveat of the biggest wave ever ridden that's been documented. If you have
Yeah.
that that's been documented, that can make it a little more objective. But I I agree with you. Like I stopped kind of caring about the height a few years ago because the height is only one factor.
Yeah.
Like 100 foot wave at Mavericks is not the same as 100 foot wave at Jaws is not the same as Dungeons or Waimea or whatever else. And so, and then it's constantly undulating and changing at different portions of the wave. So it's like if you were able to measure amplitude or the amount of energy that the wave was creating or something like that, it would be a much more meaningful score that you could assess to a given wave. But just putting a number on the height itself is kind of undermining the entirety of it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's a volume thing rather than just a height thing.
Totally. Yeah. But it makes for a good headline if ESPN can print a, a number,
For sure. Yeah. And that number, whether people agree with it or not, it's definitely blown up out of proportion and or in proportion. I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah.